earlier on in the week, I was listening to Seth Rogen on the Diary of a CEO podcast with Stephen Bartlett. It was a really enjoyable interview. I think Seth Rogen is a very engaging guy. I'm a fan of a lot of his work as well. Even a lot of his production work, like The Boys and stuff like that as well. I think he's credited himself extremely well from not just being seen as a one-trick pony in Hollywood. He had a very similar discussion, though, at one stage, which to one that I addressed in the pilot episode for this show, about how people who are criticized hate critics. And there was one quote I kind of wanted to focus in on while being a fan of Seth Rogen that I think I need to take him a little bit to task about. He said, I think at one point, he said, I think if most critics knew how much it hurts the people that made the things they're writing about, they would second guess the way they write these things. It's devastating. I know people who have never recovered from it. And honestly, a year, decades of being hurt by film reviews, it's very personal. That's something that people carry with them literally their entire lives, and I get why it fucking sucks. And look, right now, who am I to speak to Seth Rogen? I'm a guy who's just hosting a tiny little movie and TV review podcast that we joke has like 11 listeners. But I can also relate to what he's saying on a very, very small level. Look, again, nowhere near kind of having to have dealt with the level of kind of critiques, but also praise that Seth Rogen's got throughout his career. But I feel like I can also relate because I have been on the other side of critics kind of through what I've done with being my previous project, Low Blows, when I was a professional wrestler, when I was in radio, DJing, and kind of different stuff that I've done throughout my life. And I have felt the sting of having something you'd put your heart and soul into torn apart and the existential pain that can cause. So it's with that in mind that I do empathize fully with Seth Rogen, and I wish to sensitively say the following to him on this very specific subject. Don't be such a little bitch. I don't know if he was just high and speaking without any sense of context, but the lack of self-awareness he showed making this point with some of the other things he spoke about in the interview is astounding. At other points in the interview, Seth speaks about how even before he got successful and was broke, it was still a really fun life to write scripts with all of his buddies. He later spoke about how, like, even if, after he made it, how the worst case scenario that could happen to him now is that if he were, say, to get cancelled or people just stopped caring and the work just dried up, he could not work another day in his life and still live the exact same quality until the day that he dies. And compare that worst case scenario to the worst case scenario of a normal person like me or like you listening, I'm sure, who this winter had to weigh up the decision of whether they were actually just going to heat themselves or feed themselves due to rising energy costs. People who can't afford to go sick from work because that pushes them over a financial cliff. You have the likes of nurses and teachers throughout the pandemic who had to weigh up doing their jobs and either saving people's lives or giving the youth of today a future versus the ability to spend time with their own personal families and see their elderly parents. These are the kind of day-to-day choices that normal people face in their professional life. So please don't start saying poor me about having to listen to some people say your movie about sausages wasn't that funny. And I don't necessarily think the money argument is necessarily a fair one to go down by itself, but here's the thing. Critics are actually necessary for Seth Rogen to be able to live the life that he does and that he speaks about enjoying so much. I want to put it to you this way. There is so much content out these days. For reference, I see around 3, 4, maybe 5 movies a week some weeks. And even then, the likes of the movie Champions get the squeeze every now and then because it's like, I don't know if I'm going to have that much to say about it. And I only have a certain amount of hours in the day. And this is me. I watch hours and hours of content and I can't keep up with new episodes of shows that I actively want to watch, like Abbott Elementary, Picard, or Your Honor. And that's me, a guy whose main hobby this is, who runs a podcast on this stuff. And so I'll dedicate entire days of my time off my day job to doing this. Imagine what that's like, trying to keep up with this endless content machine for a normal person who has other considerations, and maybe they get to watch 1 or 2 new movies a month. How the hell do you think they choose what movies to watch? And how do they know if Seth Rogen's new movie, for example, is worth their time versus the new Scream flick, for example? That's right. Critics. Sure, it's not always professional critics who like run podcasts or have their own shows or write in the New York Times or the Guardian or whatnot, but even just people they know or who are online acting as critics, sharing their own viewpoints. That's how this machine works. And if it wasn't for critics, this is what gets me the most. There wouldn't be a Seth Rogen. You'd get what we had in the 20s when Hollywood was just kind of taking off, of studios mass manufacturing slightly different versions of the exact same flavor of content, starring the Hollywood leading man and the starlet leading lady who's beautiful and commands attention. Rogan is a lot of positive things, but he is not a traditional leading man, and the content he makes isn't necessarily what, in a world without critics, a studio focus group would suggest, if not for that human intervention through either professional critics or, like I said, just normal people playing critics and spreading the word themselves. This is the gig. This is the life you chose. It's why you live in LA now. It's why you get to have a laugh, getting off your face on weed and making fun content with your mates. It's why, if you don't like it, you can just stop and live the exact same life without ever needing to work again. And the question, Seth Rogen, I think you need to ask yourself is, would you give all of that up and change positions with someone who had to decide between heating and eating? I didn't think so. So grow the fuck up and get over it.